afternoon and welcome to the first day of Phoenix Comicon 2017. A lively bunch here. I do have a few housekeeping items before we do begin. Let's please have everybody in their seats away from the walls. We have to adhere to the strict fire code. Please turn off the flash on your cameras and please silence your ringtone. I'm sure it's awesome, but our guest is infinitely better. Now for what we're all here for. Reading some of your favorite fantasy novels, you'll notice there are maps of worlds that you're reading about. Even in RPG games based off of some of these novels, maps are created. Today, we have with us here accomplished writer, producer, production designer, and fantasy mapmaker Priscilla Spencer. Priscilla, we're going to kick it off with some map information. We're going to start with one question from me and throw it to the audience. I have the microphone here.
Okay, fantastic. First of all, I am elated that all of you decided to come. I know that there's so like the Phoenix Comicon. The reason I keep coming here year after year is that you have the most fantastic author track. You treat authors so well, and I love that it's nurtured this incredible community of creativity and support for sci-fi fantasy literature. And I just said that. This is my first time doing a panel here, so like a long-time listener, first-time caller, I suppose. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. Always growing up and just like spending as much time looking at the fantasy maps in the beginning of the novels I was reading as I spent reading the actual books. I always felt like a bit of an outlier, and so I'm so glad to be in a room full of those crazy outliers. So again, thank you so much for being here. One of the questions that people ask me most when I tell them this bizarre thing that I do in my spare time is ask, like, how did you get into this? And I came at it from the most bizarre, sort of backhanded way possible. In 2009, I was serving as a beta reader for Jim Butcher, who is in the audience. Thank you so much, Jim. He was writing the last book in the PHXCC series, which is one of those series where you expect there to be a map in it, and just for whatever reason, there hadn't been one yet. And so for this last book, Jim was determined to make this happen, and Penguin approved it, everything was going to be great. And unfortunately, Jim had lost his little hand-drawn map that he'd been referencing in a move 2 years prior, and for the last 2 books had been kind of winging things. And so he reached out to his group of beta readers who continuity edit and sort of give feedback on things as he's writing it for assistance in kind of reconstructing this map to make sure that it jived with his original vision and the contents of the last couple books. And so because I am type A in a way that type A does not adequately prepare you, like I'm type AA, you could run, I could work for Duracell. I immediately volunteered. And so I like exhaustively kept rereading the series and started, because I wasn't sure if the eventual artist that would be hired was going to have any real familiarity with the series. So I also started collecting ideas of visual reference and here's some old historical maps that this person might want to reference, and generally creating this visual encyclopedia. And Jim got further along in the book, and Jim had finished the book. And Penguin was like, okay, is the map just about done? So we can see if we can include it in the advanced reader's copy? And Jim was like, I thought you guys were gonna find the artist. And Penguin was like, I thought you were gonna find the artist. And so here they need to decide on the artist basically that day. And Jim looked at me with this little little Photoshop file, here, this is here, and here's this massive folder of visual reference. And he knew that I had a visual arts background from undergrad, and though I'd never worked as a professional illustrator, I was chiefly working in 3D animation at the time, though I like to think that my Harry Potter fan art helped me get into undergrad. So he's the kind of person that is willing to take risks for people, put his trust in people that have demonstrated a real love for the material, even if they don't necessarily have the resume to back things up. And he put his trust in me, and we worked together on this map for a couple months. In between my 60-hour-a-week work week, burning the midnight oil, and we made it happen, and it turned out far greater than it had any right to be. And the ultimate vindication, I think, with that is when like I was Googling myself in the months after the books had been published, and I found a woman, an author that had just been picked up for her first fantasy series, and she also had artistic talent, and she'd asked her publisher for like some reference for maps so that she could create the map for her own series that was going to be going to print. And the three maps that she was sent were Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia, and my map. So I was like, okay, I guess I can do this. I guess she was ready to put his trust in me. And then the next year, Jim's agent had another author that needed a map, and so she put him in touch with me. That was Saladin Ahmed for the Throne of the Crescent Moon trilogy. And the year after that, his editor had another client that needed a map. That was Mike Cole for his Shadow Up series, and so I ended up working for him, and I was friends on Twitter with Kevin Hearn, and so when he needed a map for his Iron Druid series, he reached out to me, and then it's just kind of become its own thing, so like growing like some kind of B-movie monster, and it's just been a total blast. One of the things I think that has most guided me in my sort of map-making pursuit is something that actually Jim planted in my head, like on that first project, and that is that you need to give your map a point of view. Like when he was like first talking to me, like once we knew that we were going to be working together on this project, he sort of shared, like, because like, he lives and breathes creativity, he's lived and breathed in this world for nearly a decade at that point. And I was like, okay, like here's what I'm envisioning. Like it needs to be that this like wall-sized map that would be like in Alera Imperia, that this massive academy in the major capital city of this kind of this Roman republic, and so therefore it will like in the Roman tradition, it will emphasize these very stately cities that all of because going to this school will be like all of the major children of all the major houses of all of these major cities, and so we'll want to show them respect, but also like the largest of these images of all is going to be where we are, Lara and Carrie. So like, yeah, your families are important, but we know who you pay your taxes to. So I think that in map making, like having a point of view is as important as like having the right narrator for your book. Like, after the cover art, the map is going to be your reader's, part of the reader's first impression of the series. And so you want it to have, like, tell as much about your reader, about the visual tone, the values of the people that live in this world, like everything that you can possibly like bring to the table to bring your reader like, into this world, into this new context. And two maps of the same location, like based on point of view, can be completely different. Like if you look at the map for L. Frank Baum's Wizard of Oz versus the map in Gregory Maguire's Wicked, like they both cover the same area, but Gregory Maguire's is a little bit more mature, is a little bit more sort of subversive. Like it refers to like subjugated people, and it shows that this land of Oz is not the rosy yellow brick road place that we know and love. So it just, even in a very subtle way, it sort of shows readers this is not quite what you're expecting. Here, let me show you what I envision. So it's always very important to me. My benchmark is I want to be able to envision the person that created that map in world. I want all of my maps to look like they were drawn by different people. Like I decided at the very beginning that no two maps of mine, like if you looked at like, oh, like the Codex Solera map and the Cinder Spires map, like you wouldn't guess that the same artist created them. And that is a very deliberate move on my part, because again, those are two incredibly different worlds. One thing, maps are, oh, I'm already losing people. Hi. Sorry, that's not a nice thing to do. Okay, so tips and tricks for creating fantasy maps. point of view is essential. Like, does this map exist inside your story world or outside? There have been some really fantastic fan-made maps that I've seen that does like a random valley version of the adventure undertaken in The Hobbit. There's some gorgeous and just like ridiculously nerdy maps that I absolutely adore that were done by fans of A Song of Ice and Fire. One of which that chronicles in 12 maps the visual history of Westeros and like troop movements and battles and the style that they were created in. Like it wouldn't serve the book series to like have that as the frontispiece for the series, but like in the index, like that would be incredibly valuable to like help readers understand the history. And even more geeky and incredible than that is a geological history that a bunch of geophysics nerds all got together on some message board to create. And so they have like charted like the age of the stone underneath King's Landing, and it's so like it's glorious to look at, and it's like, oh, like you are my people. Then what does this culture value? You want to be able to, are there any particular resources, or what is the visual iconography of this place? Are there any areas of our familiar history that are similar to this type of world? For Harry Connolly's Great Way series, it takes place in a world that is very sort of similar to our kind of like Grecian levels of technology. And so I actually took 2 cracks at this map. The first time, it was based on my experience of visiting Greece 10 years ago. And we visited this island called Spetses, where there are these beautiful like inlaid floors that are made out of like mosaic, essentially, of white and black stone that just make these like beautiful icons of like relevant to the fishing culture and like what these islands have produced and like what they mean to the larger Grecian nation. And I've seen like beautiful mosaic tile inlays of like in various places in Greece and Rome, and it's just so like uniquely special to that region. And so I wanted to like conjure that by creating like an actual floor mosaic map. And unfortunately, because one of the restrictions of the medium that we work in is it has to be visible and legible in printed in grayscale, black and white, and also at like paperback resolution. And we realized sort of midway through the game that like, this is not going to be visible at all. And so I ended up scrapping that idea and working on instead sort of basing the design off the type of illustration style in Greek pottery. And so it still felt very natural to the region, like people would sort of be used to that type of illustration style and help them immerse folks in that world. Then, yeah, what kind of map would these people create? If you look back at some of the earliest fantasy maps, like those in like Gulliver's Travels and Robinson Crusoe, the maps that were created for Gulliver's Travels, because like it's basically this everyman that is going on these incredible voyages, and you want the reader to be like kind of right there by his side, have the same type of mentality of the people in that time. And so they created maps that looked like the same types of like the contemporary mapmaking style of that era. Like they wanted it to look like exactly like the type of maps that people would be familiar to look at. So that you could imagine that like Lilliput would be as easy to access as France. And then for Robinson Crusoe, these looked like an 18th century infographic. They were, the map that was created for the 3rd book, it has all these little icons of like little miniature illustrations of like significant events and in this book, just to give you an idea of like what happened where, and it kind of like guides you through in a very understandable way. What is the technology level of the world that you're trying to create? What type of medium are you trying to emulate? For the Cinder Spires, copper plate or copper is it's a steampunk world, so you know that like copper's got to be really important somehow, and the way that Jim rationalized that is that copper is like in this environment the only metal that doesn't like immediately corrode on impact with the air, and so I wanted to create a map that looked like a copper plate etching, like the types of engravements. What is the word for that? Engravings. Thank you so much. The types of engravings that you would see like on our like American currency. Yeah, like do printing presses exist in this world? Like, did maps have to be created by hand? And if they have to be created by hand, who is the map intended to be used by? Like, if it's intended to be used by like the average sailor, then like you would only have like whatever is or intended to be used by someone that like doesn't have as much of the income. It would just like be very functional, like bare bones, like what you would need to have on the map in order for it to be usable. Versus if something were commissioned by a very wealthy person, then it would be like much more ornate and like often have like symbols of that house. Like it would be commissioned by something that looks like it were commissioned by one of those families. What type of navigation aids exist? Did people, like explorers, just kind of have to estimate things? Does this culture have like trigonometry and surveying equipment to like actually get the angles right? Do they have airplanes? Do they have satellites? Can they actually see what the land looks like from above? Can people fly? Like all of these questions you can ask yourselves. If you would like to go ahead and ask your question, and then we can move on to questions from the audience. Yeah, it'll be fun.
That sounds good. When you do research for your maps, do you research either geography, weather patterns, geology when creating them?
Yes, and I've actually gone like ridiculously down the rabbit hole on this one.
Yes, you have.
Says yes, I have. Because Codex Solera was the first map that I ever did. I didn't know like how much people were going to analyze what I did, and like I don't have much of a geology background. I mean, like I feel like I know as much about geology as like the average nerd does, and so I wasn't sure if there would be like geophysics nerds who would be like, this wouldn't work there, like that structure wouldn't have been created, and so like I wanted to really get things right, and even just like the most like offhanded things that Jim just like happened to throw in because he felt like it when he was writing that night, like I took very seriously. Like there's an offhand mention to there being tsunamis in this one area, and like we don't visit that area. He only mentioned tsunamis is just because like, oh, like that's the reason he had this particular cloak, because it was waterproof. And so I researched like, okay, like what are the weather conditions that create tsunamis? Like, okay, like how am I going to make sure that like this area would have like warm water, like flowing in this certain area, and then that made me think like, well, what are the plate tectonics of the Codex Solera? And it was, I'm like, okay, well, should this landmass like look like it could have fit into this landmass? And would people that like wouldn't be able to see both sides, like both sides of this continent, like be able to know that that's what they were shaped like? And then I realized this is a world where like mountains can literally stand up and walk around. Like you don't have to get the geology exactly perfect. And so that allowed me to like take a break and eat a sandwich and go to sleep.
You do have a microphone right here. Oh. Yeah, go ahead. That's as close as I can get.
Yeah, if folks have questions, do you want to go ahead and stand up in this aisle so that we can bring the microphone to you?
I can't be loud. I have a two-part question.
Okay.
What is an aspect of your map that you spent a ton of time researching to get exactly right that you thought people would notice that nobody did? And that's part one. And part two is, what part did you just think, I'll just gloss that over and nobody, but everybody was like, I noticed that.
For the second half, I'm not.
Was it
nothing's
wrong?
coming to mind at the moment. So I'll go ahead and answer the first part and then be thinking about the second half as I do. And I just forgot which part was which. This isn't something that I expected anyone to really pick up on, because sometimes when I'm like working on these maps, I get really navel-gazy, and like there are things that I'll put in that I'm not expecting anyone to pick up on. It just like kind of makes me happy to think about. And when I was working on the October Day series, which had like the main character is a changeling, like one human parent, one fae, and then she's been trying to live in the human world for a time, and kind of like she has this like very kind of contentious relationship with trying to make kind of both sides jive and kind of trying to find her place. And